Hello everyone and welcome to this epic compilation video. The reason I decided to put these videos into a compilation is that, they are on a playlist, but I felt they are better stitched together. You can jump around chapters and you get a better insight into how the characters compare in terms of their structure and how their lore overlaps. So yeah, that was my main reason for doing this, because I felt I kind of needed it. I want to bring them all together. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this one, because these are some of my most researched videos that I've ever made, and they took me a wee while to put together, to say the least. I've also trimmed out outros, so they kind of seamlessly flow from one to the other. So yeah, enjoy, and I'll let previous Lauren talk about Tasha. Hello everyone, and welcome. So in today's video, I'm going to take you through, step by step, Tasha's hero's journey. For those who don't know, Tasha is D&D's Witch Queen, and is also a namesake of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Now, I've seen a lot of videos document Tasha's story, but my goal here is to demonstrate how her story fits in the hero's journey, or story circle. I want to show that no matter how complex a character arc appears, more often than not, it is usually always abiding by some sort of narrative structure. Now, before I get into this, her backstory is rather complex, and it doesn't help that she goes by several aliases. Moreover, I'm using current Wizards of the Coast lore, so I will be referring to Tasha and Igwelf as the same person, and I shall do my best to present Tasha or Igwelf's hero's journey as accurately as possible. I'll also link to my sources below if anyone is interested in where I got my info. Also, I'd like to mention that I'm not sure how much of what I'm saying below is strictly canon, and the information that I've chosen to include is what I think best explains Tasha's motivations or character development. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's begin. So we start in the zone of comfort. Here we have a child Natasha, or Natasha the Dark as her name was then. She was adopted by Baba Yaga, an extraordinarily powerful mage and archfey who could pass through magical planes with ease. Here Natasha lives with her other adopted sisters and Baba Yaga's biological children in Oath, though she also spent a considerable amount of time in the Feywild. She lives in a dancing hut and has been tutored by Baba Yaga in all things magical. It was rumoured that Natasha could summon demons at just 10 years old. However, the relationship between Natasha and her siblings is grown fraught, as they are jealous of Natasha's powers and ambition. Next is that she desires something. Natasha wants to develop and challenge her powers, so she strikes out on her own and relocates to a town near the city of Lopola. Here she changes her name to Hura and begins to research and dabble in evil magic, as the quickest route to power is always through the evil stuff, right? She plunders the vault of Dowd and likely steals Dowd's wondrous lanthorn, or lantern, and adds it to her collection of stolen treasures. Her ambition to attain even more power is only growing. Now we move into an unfamiliar environment. After some time, she moves on to the free city of Greyhawk. She goes by her old name, but the shortened version, Tasha. Until now, Tasha was very independent, but deep down she knew she could learn more from others than she could on her own. She wants to make use of her improved powers and joins the Company of Seven, which is an adventuring group. This is where I think she meets a powerful and eccentric Zagyg. She becomes an apprentice of Zagyg, and around this time creates Tasha's hideous laughter. Later, they summon and imprison the demon lord Fraz Urb'luu in Greyhawk Castle. The ever-ambitious Tasha interrogates him, and through these conversations she gleans more information about demons that she can use to her advantage. This is unbeknownst to Tasha's mentor, Zagyg. At some point, Fraz Urb'luu tells her the true name of his half-fiend son, Soth. This is very important for future Tasha lore, so remember this. When Tasha has learned all she can about demons, she leaves Zagyg, but not in a good way. She basically runs off and steals most of his books on demonology, the most important being the Tomb of Zyx. Next up is adapting to the situation. Tasha is beginning to find her stride as an all-powerful magic user and travels to the lost caverns of Soth in the Yathil Mountains, where she summons and binds Fraz Urb'luu's half-fiend son, Soth. Sorry, this is getting very wordy here, so I'll do my best to pronounce this all properly. Because she knows his true name, Soth, let's say, becomes her advisor and reveals to her the true name of another powerful demon, Prince Graz'zt, or Graz'zt, depending on how you pronounce that. I've heard it done both ways, but I'm going to go with Graz'zt. Using the Tomb of Zyx, she wants to write the Demonomicon of Igwelf. Around the time of writing the Demonomicon, she changes her name from Tasha to Igwelf, hence the book's title. Moreover, Demonomicon is what enables her to summon and control Gratz. Here we have they get what they want. During this time she has 2 children, a son, Ayuz the Evil, whose father is Gratz, and a vampire daughter, Drelsna, whose father is unknown. She builds an army with Gratz and her son's help, and attacks and controls Perenland, which surrounds the Yatel Mountains. She sets up base in the Lost Caverns of Zagyg. She's beginning to build an empire now, and her reputation precedes her. At this point, people call her the Witch Queen. She carries on summoning demons. This all goes on for about 10 years. Next, we have a heavy price to pay. Due to her repeated summoning of demons, an abysmal energy builds under the Yatel Mountains. This causes a rift into the abyss. Gratz mentions the rift can be closed by freeing Zagyg. During this process, though, Zagyg fights back and attacks Igwelv. She does defeat him, but it leaves her vulnerable and she loses control of Gratz. The two engage in an epic fight and Igwelv successfully banishes Gratz back into the abyss. However, she is severely weakened. Sensing this weakness, the Perenland folk take up arms and drive out her forces. This is one of the lowest points in Igwelv's life, and she flees. For a while she is presumed dead. Later, the Circle of Eight and the wizard Mordenkainen sponsor groups to explore the Lost Caverns of Zagyg to claim its lost and plundered treasures. Cue the Lost Caverns of Zagyg adventure module. It's here these sponsor groups encounter and kill her daughter Drelsna. Rumour has it, Drelsna was the only person Tasha truly loved, so her death is a devastating blow. Next we have they return to a familiar situation. Igwelv's son Ayuz, much like his mother and, father, is also very powerful. He achieves demigod status and uses his powers to bring his mother back from the brink. Igwelv tries one last time to summon Gratz, but having done this dance before, Gratz anticipates what she is up to and instead pulls her into the abyss. There she stays for a very long time. In the abyss, Igwelv continues her demon studies and grows even more powerful. She also journeys to the second layer of Hades, or Niflheim. However, like her younger self, she makes many enemies along the way, including Gratz. Again, they have a very toxic relationship, and she ends up fleeing to the Feywild. Next up, we have they have changed as a result of their journey. Igwelv enters the Feywild using a page from her mother's magical book. Her mother is of course Archfey Baba Yaga, mother of all witches. Tasha makes herself at home in the Feywild and chooses another alias, Zybilna. Over time she transforms into a Fey creature, but outwardly she appears human. Her temperament has changed too. She is less ambitious and uninterested in being the all-powerful wizard she was. She is also less selfish and is no longer studying demonology. She resides peacefully in her domain Prismir. But has she genuinely changed? Or is this an act to stay hidden? I want to think she has changed, but who knows? Moreover, how long will this time of peace last? She has made many enemies along the way, and don't forget about her jealous sisters when she has grown up in Baba Yaga's dancing hut. Cue the Wild Beyond the Witchlight campaign. So that's her story arc for now. What do you think? Has she changed for the better? Or is it all an act? Has she overcome her flaws or succumbed to them? In particular, her ever-vaulting ambition. Is she a hero or a tragic hero? Interestingly, when I pulled up the monster stat block, I found the following notes for role-playing. They read, Igwelv was a brilliant, calculating figure, hardly prone to emotional outbursts. But as Zybilna, she allows her emotions to run rampant and is more likely to find herself in the grip of happiness, anger, or melancholy. This is the price she pays to exert control over the Feywild and impose her will on the domain of Prismir. Now, to me, that suggests her personality and temperament, as it stands, is a way to gain better control over her dominion, rather than being a genuine shift in values. But I'll keep an open mind. Next, it says her alignment is chaotic neutral. Fine, neither good nor evil, okay? Now, the personality trait shines a more positive light on her, as it reads, I've become more temperate in my old age. To me, this suggests there is some form of genuine good change in her. This is further supported by her ideal, where she says, I used to believe that emotions and kindness were signs of weakness. Now I see their strength. This is complemented by her flaw, which reads, My mother, Baba Yaga, warned me that my arrogance would be my undoing. As sure as stars light the night sky, she might be right. So maybe, just maybe, she has seen the error of her ways and is working on improving herself. Let me know what you think. Hello everyone, and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to plot the hero's journey, or story circle, of one of the oldest and iconic characters in Dungeons & Dragons, Fraz Urb'luu, Prince of Deception and Demon Lord of Illusions. Now I decided to focus on Fraz Urb'luu because of my Tasha video, as I think his lore is just as interesting. Fraz Urb'luu, like Tasha, is also an important part of Dungeons & Dragons history. Because Fraz Urb'luu is an ancient demon lord, the cult that worships him is also very ancient. Moreover, because Fraz Urb'luu is a literal prince of deception, a lot of his cult followers aren't even aware they are worshipping him. Instead, they think he's some other deity or fiend. His cult recruits their members by trickery. For example, they pretend to worship a good deity, but all the while they're associating themselves with Fraz Urb'luu. Very sneaky, but deception and trickery can only get someone so far, and they are no doubt setting themselves up for a very big fall. I shall get to Fraz Urb'luu's fall in a while, but to understand how it happened, we need to know what he was like in the beginning, and outline his hero's journey, or story circle, step by step. So we start in a zone of comfort. Fraz Urb'luu rules over the 176th layer of the Abyss, called Hollowheart. He has shaped it into his liking. It was said some parts rivaled the incredibly beautiful Arvandor and Bytopia. During this time, he was untouchable. Next, he wants something. Fraz Urb'luu has grown complacent and is recruiting more and more demons to do his bidding. He does this with his ultra-powerful staff, the Jeweled Scepter of Adamantine. The staff controls demon and human minds alike. During this time, he has a son with Vilhara, a witch. Their son is called Sochkanth, who is quite a big deal in future D&D lore. Cue the Lost Caverns of Sochkanth adventure. Generally, he's attracting unwanted attention and envy. Other demons want to own or destroy his staff, and there are many failed attempts to steal it. Despite all these threats against him, Fraz Urb'luu continues seeking power and recruiting more demons. Now he enters an unfamiliar situation. Fraz Urb'luu's hubris gets the better of him, and he allows himself to be summoned by Zagyg, as he sees it as an opportunity to wreak havoc on the material plane. Now Zagyg has put in a lot of effort leading up to this. He has even consulted with Gratz, or Grazit, to find out Fraz Urb'luu's true name. Remember, Fraz Urb'luu has a lot of demon enemies who are after Hollowheart. Moreover, upon his summoning, the egotistical Fraz Urb'luu doesn't know that Zagyg has the Ichor-Lance, given to him by Igwilf, who got it from her connections in the Abyss. Fraz Urb'luu destroys the Ichor-Lance, thinking that Zagyg will be powerless. However, little did he know that breaking the lance was what Zagyg wanted him to do. When the lance was broken, it unleashed a wave of energy that strained Fraz Urb'luu's power, ultimately leading to his imprisonment. The trickster was beaten at his own game. He is imprisoned in a bas-relief visage, which is a stone carving on a wall. All of this happens under Greyhawk Castle. Next, he adapts to his situation. Fraz Urb'luu is imprisoned for around 200 years. He has accepted his lot and is biding his time to be freed. He regularly taunts adventurers who visit him with riddles and schemes. But after a while they stop visiting, which makes him a little angry and bored, to say the least. While in prison, he reveals his son's true name to Igwilf. I'm not sure why he does this, but I get the impression it was through interrogation, rather than a friendly chat. While he is in prison, demons descend upon Hollowheart, and it becomes a bit of a free-for-all. His staff is broken into several pieces, and is scattered throughout the multiverse. I will add a quick sidebar here, as in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, a fragment of his staff is actually in her Demonomicon, and when it's retrieved from the pocket plane, this causes the Demonomicon to roll back to the Tome of Zyx. Now we move on to he gets what he wants. So I'll go a little bit off-piste here, as I find the real-world history behind this point in Fraz Urb'luu's timeline very interesting. The freeing of Fraz Urb'luu was triggered by two players in Gary Gygax's home campaign. One of them I think was his son, Ernie. They were carrying two Vorpal swords and a Holy Avenger. Anyway, they were ruining his story because they were annihilating everything. When they encountered Fraz Urb'luu, they unknowingly freed him because they thought he was wrongfully imprisoned or caged by an evil sorcerer. They were tricked, naturally. Realising their mistake a little too late, they used a scroll of gate to call upon the god of Zeus to help them. But lo and behold, he didn't answer their pleas. They rolled very badly. This resulted in them being transported back to the Abyss with Fraz Urb'luu. Fortunately for them though, Fraz Urb'luu did take pity and eventually freed them. But the swords were destroyed. So yeah, Fraz Urb'luu got what he wanted, to be freed and return home to Hollowheart. One could also suggest that Gary Gygax got what he wanted too, which was to destroy those pesky weapons. Now he pays a heavy price. While he was imprisoned, the Hollowheart was reduced to endless plains of white sand. The demon lords also dispatched everyone who was loyal to him. So not only has he got to come to terms with losing his home, but also his allies. To rub salt in his wounds, though, he cannot use a staff anymore to rebuild the Hollow Heart, due to its obliteration. During this time, he swears revenge on humans, as he holds Zagyg and Igwilf responsible for destroying everything he cared about. Next, Fraz Urb'luu moves into a familiar situation. Over time, Fraz Urb'luu begins to rebuild the Hollow Heart, not to its former glory, but he's making good progress. He misses the power he used to wield with the Sceptre of Adamantine, or his staff. Finally, he has changed. Fraz Urb'luu has learned not to be so enthusiastic about being summoned. He hugely underestimated how powerful Zagyg was, and this mistake cost him everything. So to prevent this from happening again, he binds himself to a black gem within the abyss, so that when he is summoned, his essence is transported to it. This black gem of course stays in the Hollow Heart, and not where the summoning ritual occurs. This doesn't go to plan in the adventure Out of the Abyss, where all demons are summoned to the Underdark, including Fraz Urb'luu, in his black gem. I think how it works is that his body stays in Hollow Heart, but his essence or mind goes into the black gem. The black gem is the size of a human fist, but because it contains Fraz Urb'luu, it corrupts and causes madness to anyone who holds it. If the gem is broken, Fraz Urb'luu is free, and his essence or mind returns to his body in Hollow Heart. On the material plane, he cannot escape from the gem. So that rounds up Fraz Urb'luu's story circle, or plot embryo. Also, what do you think of Fraz Urb'luu? Has he grown more fearful in his years, or is he plotting something and merely biding his time? He does want revenge, and no doubt wreak havoc on a material plane. I think this old poem or song about Fraz Urb'luu does a good job of describing who he is and what we can expect of him. He comes in the winter, compassion and trust. He dances in spring, with your love and your lust. He calls in the summer, and serve him you must. He withers in autumn, you save him from dust. Your father, your mother, your lover, your child, his son, his daughter, his minion beguiled. And now that you've offered your life and your soul, he'll drag you to ruin and swallow you all. Hello everyone, and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to take you through the story circle, hero's journey, or plot embryo of the mad archmage Zagyg. I've always liked Zagyg as a character, as he has very rich lore. Now, as always with my videos, I will take that lore and organise it into the story circle, to make sense of it all. At the end of this analysis, we'll have a deeper insight into why Zagyg behaves the way he does, and what exactly motivates him. I already have a few videos on the story circle, so I won't go into too much detail about it, but if you're interested, I'll link to them in the description. Anyway, let's begin. So we start in a zone of comfort. Zagyg was born to Despotrix Elaine Irigan. A Despotrix is a term for the matriarchal leaders of Hardy. Hardy is also known as the City of the Scorned in central Flannis. It was a place that was supposed to be ruled forever by women. Due to being born into nobility, Zagyg has a rather comfortable life. Nevertheless, he grows bored of comfort and wants to seek adventure. Now he desires something. Zagyg either joins or forms a company of 7 adventuring group. He hopes to escape his identity and make his mark by adventuring and acquiring knowledge. Next, he enters an unfamiliar situation. On one of the company of 7 adventures, the group reaches the crypt of Lysandred the Mad, a lich. Now, this lich takes quite a shine to Zagyg, allowing him to stay for a while, unlike the rest of the company of 7. Zagyg learns a heck of a lot from Lysandred, and uses his newly learned knowledge to his advantage. He adapts to that situation. Zagyg makes his way to Greyhawk, where he wants to use what he has learned from Lysandred in a more political setting, and becomes Lord Mayor of the city. He's beginning to find some purpose in life, but that need for adventure and knowledge is gnawing away at him. So he embarks on another adventure with the company of 7 to the lost Flan city of Verilos. Now, what he finds in Verilos will impact other lore, because among the treasures the company of 7 plunder is a tome of Zyx. Anyone who's watched my Tasha video will know how significant that find is. He gets what he wants. Zagyg returns to Greyhawk very rich and established. He thrives in his role as Lord Mayor and makes several reformations in the legal code, and is the founder of several colleges. He also creates the mining towns of Diamond Lake and Steaming Springs in Cairn Hills. Greyhawk was referred to as a gem of Flannis during this boom period. Also, it is at this time that he begins construction of Castle Greyhawk. Again, this is another pivotal piece of lore that affects other prominent characters in this setting. Castle Greyhawk is where he and Igwilf, or Tasha, summon and trap Fraz Urb'luu. If Zagyg had not built Castle Greyhawk, Igwilf or Tasha likely would not have learned how to summon and trap Grats and take control of Perrinland. Zagyg pays a heavy price. Zagyg has taken on too much, his responsibilities consume him, and he descends into madness. The citizens of his beloved Greyhawk fear him, and the city directors are losing faith. During an episode of Misjudgment, Zagyg brings a black dragon from Mistmarsh, homunculi, and a flesh golem into a city meeting with him, leaving the city directors dumbstruck. Zagyg returns to a familiar situation. Lysandred, Zagyg's old lich mentor, learns about the trouble Zagyg is in. He too found himself in the past in a similar situation and warned that Zagyg needed to leave the material plane. If Zagyg did not go, he was putting the lives of everyone in Greyhawk at risk. Zagyg follows Lysandred's advice and sequesters himself away in Castle Greyhawk to conduct experiments while also taking time to explore other planes. Zagyg changes. Zagyg has finally worked out how to prevent his desire for knowledge from consuming him and has successfully pulled himself back from the brink of insanity. He has captured 9 demigods and imprisoned them under Greyhawk Castle. He did this with an artifact called the God Trap. Zagyg created the God Trap to create more power and reach some form of divine rank. The captured 9 demigods include Ayuz, who interestingly is the son of Igwilf, or Tasha, and Gratz. Over time, most of the demigods manage to escape. When Ayuz escapes Castle Greyhawk, Zagyg has already ascended, and for some reason has decided to choose a different spelling for his name, replacing the I for a Y. He has got what he wanted and has acquired enough knowledge that no other mortal mage has achieved, apart from Vecna and of course Tasha. He is a fully fledged demigod in Bacob's service, Bacob being the god of magic, arcane, knowledge, balance and foresight. So what do we think of Zagyg? Looking at his story arc, we can see that his pursuit of knowledge came with a heavy price, in that he was close to losing his sanity. But overall, it seemed that he got what he wanted in the end. But why is that? I think that perhaps while Zagyg had a thirst of adventuring and learning, the driving force behind that wasn't a need to make himself more important than others. In my opinion, it came from a place of genuine curiosity. What do you think? One question that does remain, though, is whether it will all be enough. Is there a risk of Zagyg regressing and driving himself to insanity again? Who knows? But I do think it is a possibility. I really enjoy this character, as his lore overlaps with so many other iconic Dungeons & Dragons characters. For example, Tasha, Fraz Urb'luu and Ayuz. Hello everyone and welcome. So in today's video, I'm going to focus on Dungeons & Dragons' most formidable villain, Vecna. I will then delve into his backstory or lore to see what pivotal moments turn this once human king into the monster we know today. Like all good villain stories, Vecna starts in tragic circumstances, but to document his rise to evil, I'm going to use Freytag's pyramid that will break up Vecna's story into 5 arcs or chapters. So at the bottom of the pyramid, we have the introduction. This established the character and the environment. Here I've written, Vecna is an orphan. His mother was a hedge witch. She lived in Uith. An order of wizards accused her of practicing necromancy and exiled her. She had to leave Vecna behind with the wizards, and he was bound to a life of servitude. As a young boy, he worked as a shoe polisher and then as a scribe. He hated the wizards for what they did to him and his mother. Next, we have Rise, or Rise in Action. This is where things start to heat up, and Vecna's story begins. Vecna swears revenge against the cruel wizards and makes a point of studying in secret. He wants to grow more powerful than the wizard order who exiled his mother and bound him to a life of service. The more he studies, the more a disembodied voice speaks to him, encouraging him to seek revenge. At this point, Vecna is at the edge of making some big decisions. When he acts, he moves into the climax level of Freytag's pyramid. The climax is a point of no return, and his world is turned upside down. Here, Vecna destroys the wizard order that robbed him and his mother, but the more his power grows, the more proud he becomes. On the night he destroyed the wizard order, he begins writing the Book of Vile Darkness at the behest of that ominous voice. It is a wicked text that records his foul thoughts and dreams. It's said to drive mortals mad if they read it. He goes on to conquer and capture more land throughout Uith. After Vecna's world has changed, he's heading for tragedy. This is a rise and fall of the pyramid. Decades later, Vecna begins to grow old and fears his weakening body will make him vulnerable, like he was when he was an orphan. He's incensed that he has come so far only to see his body gradually give up. Given all he has been through and achieved, he thinks he has a right to immortality. Later, he achieves it, though it isn't clear how. Some say he confronted his own death and imprisoned it. Others say his arrogance offended the deities, so they cursed him. To live between the living and the dead, he becomes a lich. So Vecna has cheated death. What's next? He's heading for Catastrophe. When a character reaches Catastrophe, the inevitable becomes true. Vecna, now immortal, amasses a loyal following of lieutenants over the years as he continues to conquer other worlds. His most revered, though, is Kaz, a ruthless and cruel paladin. Vecna gives Kaz a powerful and also sentient sword, forged from the heart of a frozen star. Over time, the sword corrupts Kaz, and he tries to murder Vecna with it. Before Vecna's physical form is destroyed, he flings Kaz into the domain of dread, in the Shadowfell. Vecna's spirit then traverses the multiverse, and only his hand and eye remain in their physical form. Vecna regains enough power from his followers, as they worship him, to reclaim his physical form. After many trials and tribulations, he finally ascends to godhood, but he has isolated himself in the process, creating a long list of enemies who want him dead, or at least banished, including his once close friend Kaz. While he may have gained formidable powers, he is, in some ways, just as vulnerable as he was when he was a child. So what are Vecna's goals now? He's achieved godhood. What's next? Well, his insatiable urge to become the most powerful being in the universe has set him on a course to use the ritual of remaking to recreate the universe exactly how he wants it. He wants everyone to serve him as he had to serve the Wizard Order when he was a child. But what makes Vecna so special? Why is he one of D&D's most formidable villains? I think it's because historically, Vecna's origins can be traced back to the early version of Dungeons & Dragons. His lore goes back to the 70s, not to mention his place is cemented in pop culture, inspiring a supervillain in Stranger Things. But Vecna did not start out as a lich god we know today. The basis for his story began as two magical body parts, the eye and the hand of Vecna. These two magical artifacts are still very much part of Vecna's lore, but it's funny to think about Vecna beginning just as a hand and eye. So in 1976, the Eldritch Wizardry supplement was published by Gary Gygax and Brian Blum. This supplement was actually a rulebook for the original edition, and also included extras such as the Druid class. But more importantly, this is where the eye and hand of Vecna first make their appearance. The supplement describes the hand as the remains of a lich, and appears dried, shriveled and blackened. Apparently the lich was so powerful, these relics retained a lot of their magical potency. The hand and eye lore naturally left a lot of unanswered questions, such as, who was Vecna? And why was, or is he so powerful? This then opened the stage for the Vecna we know today. Okay, so we've got a good idea about Vecna and his origins, but what about his minions or creatures that are drawn to him? Let's not forget, he wouldn't have been able to reach godhood without drawing power from his worshippers. So, if we think back to Vecna's arc, he wanted to avoid death, not because he was scared of it, but because he thought he deserved immortality. His followers want the same thing, but their motivation is different. Consequently, Vecna tends to attract anything or anyone who fears dying and has a short lifespan. However, once they're within Vecna's clutches, they become expendable and serve him as cultists. With all that in mind though, how does someone go about playing Vecna? If we reflect or think back to Vecna's path to immortality, he became a lich. Yet there are other ways to say cheat in death. What sets a lich apart from something else, though, is that they crave power, and they use this power to dominate or destroy others. Some may even want a bit of both, depending on their alignment. Okay, so to play a lich like Vecna, it's important to keep in mind the desire to dominate and control. How do you actually play that? Well, when it comes to choosing spells, Dominate Monster is a great example, as it ticks all those boxes. You can also change the class of the lich to get a different range of spells. Instead of wizard spells, you might be able to use druid spells that have a lot more decaying and fungal flavour. My favourite or most nasty lich spells tend to be 6th level. Here, a lich can cast Disintegrate, and the only way to be brought back is with either True Resurrection or Wish. Another thing to think about is consistency. Now, this is important for playing a villain, regardless of who they are. Nobody does anything that's random, unless they're a little chaotic, of course. But even in those situations, the randomness is usually linked to some sort of life experience. This is when strategy comes into play. So in playing your lich, go back to their motivations. Do they want to dominate by control or destruction? Keeping this in mind will help you build a spell routine. If destruction is your thing, you may want to focus on some nasty spells that inflict an excessive amount of damage. Opening the first round with Psychic Scream, for example, could result in some pretty horrific head pops when a player's HP is reduced to 0. However, when playing a lich, the main goal is to have fun. Leaning into the character and role-playing the ultimate villain should be entertaining. Perhaps you bellow a maniacal laugh when casting Fireball after someone's head pops. Having a detailed plan of combat is great, but don't let it come at a cost to the actual gameplay. If you feel you're getting too lost in the spell routine, loosen it up a bit. and go with intuition. You've likely invested a lot of time in your Lich's backstory and build, so you hopefully know enough to go off script every now and then. Now, I'm not saying don't make a plan, as I highly recommend it. I'm just suggesting that if following the plan is becoming too overwhelming, don't let it affect the gameplay, as the whole point of the plan is to carry some of the cognitive load, so you can put more energy into the characterisation and role-playing. Hello everyone and welcome. In today's video I'm going to explore Strahd and take a deep dive into his character development, but there is a twist. I'm going to frame him as a tragic hero. Strahd as a character sees himself as a tragic hero and not a cold-hearted villain. In his opinion, he was a victim of circumstance. He believed what he was doing was right, and none of the horror that came of it was his fault. So for people who do not know who Strahd is, he is one of the most famous villains in Dungeons & Dragons, and the campaign based on him is The Curse of Strahd. Strahd is a vampire who lives in the quaint mountain valley of Barovia. Well, it was until Strahd made a pact with the Dark Powers and it got sucked into a demi-plane of dread in the Shadowfell. Neither Strahd nor the residents of Barovia can leave, as a deadly fog engulfs the outer boundaries of the valley. The only people who can come and go are the Vistani. The Vistani are travelling people who wander through the mist of the Shadowfell. Strahd uses the Vistani to bring travellers to Barovia when he grows tired of tormenting the locals. Strahd's relationship with the Vistani goes back to when they healed him during a war or campaign he fought in. Because they never ask for anything in return, he allows them to enter and leave Barovia at their will. When players encounter Strahd, he is devoid of all emotion. He accepts that he is evil and has sold his soul to get what he wants, which is immortality. Being a vampire has slowly eroded away anything that makes him remotely human, and he considers himself better than the living. The only traumatic event that haunts him is the death of his beloved Tatiana. Strahd is a master manipulator, so when people encounter him, he can be very charming, which disarms them. However, he always looks for weakness within a party, and when he spots it, you can bet he's going to exploit it. But what has made Strahd this tragic, yet master manipulator and formidable monster? Well, the story circle plot embryo can help untangle the circumstances that set him on this course. So if we begin in a zone of comfort, Strahd is a privileged prince and soldier who conquers lands and realms far and wide. This ultimately brings him to the mountainous valley he calls Barovia. He looked up to his father, King Borov, whom he named the valley after. His family's fearsome reputation is important to him, and because he is battle-hardened, he comes across as arrogant, cold, and unforgiving. But while he is content with waging wars against his family's enemies, there is something he desires. Otherwise the prospect of change wouldn't be tempting. Strahd wants his mother, Queen Ravenovia, to love him like his brother Sergei. However, after the death of King Borov, she has grown more fearful of Strahd and has prioritised keeping Sergei away from him. She fears he will become like Strahd if he gets too close to him. Strahd is aware of this, and this makes him envious of his brother. So, we've established what Strahd desires, which I'd say is a deeper connection to someone other than his ego. Now, he enters an unfamiliar situation to achieve what he desires. He understands in order that to find someone to love, he has to settle down. So Strahd chooses to stay in Barovia. Military campaign-driven Strahd is no more, or so we think. However, the lack of violence and gore makes him restless, and he begins to reflect on his own mortality, bringing up thoughts of his father's death. He begins to study magic so that he can live forever. He forges a pact with the Dark Powers in the Shadowfell. Next, we have adapting to the situation. So Strahd has accepted that Barovia is going to be his permanent home, and he searches for artisans and craftsmen to help him build a magnificent castle, fit for the prince he is. He calls the castle Ravenloft as a tribute to his mother. He invites or commands Sergei and his mother, Queen Ravenovia, to come and live in the castle. En route to the castle, though, Queen Ravenovia dies, which leaves Strahd devastated. In his grief, he buries her in the crypt beneath the castle, instead of returning her body to their ancestral homeland. Reinforcing his decision to stay in Barovia, his brother Sergei now moves in with him. For a brief moment, Strahd gets what he wants, or thinks he does. Strahd finally encounters someone in Barovia whom he can love and think can fill his emotional void and make him complete. This person is Tatiana, and she is incredibly beautiful. Strahd is very much attracted to her and showers her with gifts. He very much believes he has a future with Tatiana, and sees her as a way of furthering his family's legacy, and more importantly, providing him with a suitable heir. Later, he pays a price for it. Tatiana instead falls in love with Sergei, Strahd's nicer and well-adjusted brother. This crushes Strahd and dashes his hopes of furthering his family's bloodline. He's infuriated and thinks Sergei has stolen Tatiana away from him, like he did their mother. Strahd's cruel and evil streak gets the better of him, and the night of the wedding, Strahd murders his brother and drinks his blood, sealing his fate with the dark powers. He pursues Tatiana, but she is so horrified by him, she runs away and hurls herself off a balcony, choosing death over him. Strahd's guards retaliate and try to kill Strahd, but he does not die. Instead, he turns into a vampire. After killing the guards, Strahd sees his mother and father in the clouds, disapprovingly judging him for destroying their family, more importantly, the von Zarevich reputation and legacy. At this point, he feels he has lost everything. Next, Strahd returns to a familiar situation. Strahd returns to his seat at Ravenloft, which is sucked into the demiplane, along with the rest of Barovia, on account of his pact with the Dark Powers. Here, Strahd continues ruling over the residents of Barovia, much as he had done in a previous life as a conqueror and privileged prince. Finally, Strahd has changed as a result of the journey. Strahd is unable to come to terms with everything he has lost, especially Tatiana. He tries to recreate the relationship he desires with her, but it's never the same. Recently, he has taken a shine to Irina Collin, believing her to be a reincarnation of Tatiana. His old urges to conquer and kill are only placated by fleeting cat-and-mouse moments with visitors entering Barovia, or the joy he takes from corrupting others into vampire spawn. He longs to be released and believes finding a worthy tribute or heir to rule over Barovia will set him free. But his own arrogance, pride, and lack of compassion are all-consuming and prevent him from doing so. Ultimately, these flaws are responsible for Strahd's destruction and damn him for eternity as a vampire. Right, so that's a whistle-stop tour of Strahd's development as a tragic hero. Now, I know there is extra lore surrounding his story, but the majority, if not all the resources I used, were from the Curse of Strahd campaign. So, to understand why Strahd is not a tragic hero, but a villain, it's good to know the typical structure of both. To be a tragic hero, a character tends to tick the following boxes. First of all, they're usually a good person. Not perfect, mind, but on the whole, they have a good moral compass. Did Strahd ever tick this box? I'd say no. They also tend to begin their story doing something good. Definitely not Strahd, as he was busy waging wars. The audience usually cheers for them in some way, likely at the beginning. Were you ever supporting Strahd? Probably not. Most importantly, though, what makes a tragic hero, well, tragic, is that one fatal flaw that ultimately engineers their downfall. When this happens, it's called peripeteia, or a sudden reversal of fortune. Peripeteia does not happen at random, and it's linked to the fatal flaw. In my opinion, Strahd was pretty much all flaw. He had no redeeming qualities. He was always self-motivated, driven by intense jealousy or envy. The punishment a tragic hero receives also sometimes doesn't seem fair. So if you look at the Curse of Strahd, one could argue the only characters being punished in this story are the poor Barovians and the restless soul of Tatiana. Strahd, for the most part, is, well, largely unaffected. The only thing he can't do is leave Barovia to go on a conquering campaign. Finally, the hallmark of a tragic hero is that they tend to become self-aware of their actions after their downfall. I'd say Strahd has learned and understood how he got into the situation he's in, but I don't think he cares. In fact, he's using his unfortunate set of circumstances to benefit himself. He's not reflecting on why he can never leave Barovia. Not really. He's still in the mindset of a spoilt prince and gets delight from having power and control over people. The only thing Strahd has in common with a tragic hero is that neither of them get what they want. For Strahd, this was Tatiana. A villain, in my opinion, however, matches Strahd to a T. A villain is an evil and wicked character that harms others, and they justify their actions according to their own set of principles. So with Strahd, it's all about furthering the von Zarevich name and empire to get what he wants, no matter the cost. He overlaps with an antagonist, but he is not one. He does more than stand in the way of the hero's goals, and is not just a source of conflict. In fact, I'd call him a villain protagonist, because without him, there is no Curse of Strahd, and Barovia would have never existed in its current state. Hello everyone, and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to take you through Soth's story circle to demonstrate that no matter how rich a character's lore is, it's usually abiding to some sort of structure. What I want to show here is how Soth went from an esteemed knight to monster, Although, like all great characters, he's complicated, and some may think it's fair to observe that he was always a monster, and his fall from grace was fated because of this. Now, I've used several sources to really get to the heart of who Soth is and why he did what he did. So this arc focuses mainly on his life up until the Cataclysm and a few hundred years afterwards. Some of the lore I've included may or may not be canon. Regardless, what I do mention sheds some light on how the Soth we know came to be. So we begin in a zone of comfort. Soth starts as a squire and is in service to Holger Windsound. During this time, he's adventuring and slaying evil creatures in the name of the Knights of Solamnia. Eventually, he's promoted to Knight of the Sword and then Knight of the Rose. He is also supposedly happily married, and as far as anyone is concerned, seems content. On the surface, he is a dedicated and courageous knight, saving the world from the evils within it. However, he has a ruthless side, which grows as he becomes more successful. Next, Soth wants something. Soth is adjusting to his new rank, and while he is content for a while, he begins to think about who will carry on his legacy, and he is yet to have the son he desires. As Soth is travelling to Palanthas, the Jewel of Solamnia, to attend an annual gathering for the Knights of Solamnia, he and his band of soldiers spot a group of silver nasty elves who are being attacked by ogres. Soth and his knights save the elves, and this is where he meets the beautiful Isolde Denessa, with whom he starts an affair. Soth initially offers to let her stay at Zagyg Keep while she heals. However, she continues to live there long after she is better. Now he enters an unfamiliar situation. Soth's life becomes complicated when his wife, Corinne Gladria, learns of his affair with Isolde and seeks help from a hedge witch, so she can give Soth the son he desires. Soth is infuriated that his wife has meddled with the supernatural to conceive a child, which no doubt will prevent him from spending time with his new love, Isolde. To complicate things further, Isolde also becomes pregnant a month before his son with his wife, Corinne, is due. Soth is left with an impossible choice. He adapts to the situation. Soth begins to panic, and in an attempt to regain some control and order over his life, he concocts a brutal and evil plan. He secretly orders Caradoc, a loyal and ambitious steward, to murder his wife Corinne and their newly born son, who as a result of being conceived by magical means is cursed. When his wife and son are gone, Soth focuses fully on his life with Isolde. But his ego and ruthlessness continue to grow. He doesn't have an ounce of regret for the heinous act he has committed against his first wife and infant son. Soth gets what he wants. Soth and Isolde appear to be making the most of their lot, and their family, on the surface, is doing well. Soth names his second son after his great-great-grandfather, Peredur Soth. However, this idyllic family setup only fuels Soth's paranoia. His fear of losing the life he has sacrificed so much for is all-consuming. Soth pays a heavy price. Finally, Soth's deplorable actions have caught up with him. He's arrested for the murder of his wife, Corinne, and their first son, and later sentenced to death. But before the executioner is able to remove his head, Soth's loyal band of knights rescue him, and later his sentence is reduced to exile at Zagyg Keep. Though Soth has escaped with his life, he has lost his identity as a knight and is devastated. He falls into a deep depression. Desperate to help her husband, Isolde begins to pray to the goddess Mishakal to save him. It's through these prayers that Mishakal speaks of a coming cataclysm, and that Soth is the only one who can prevent it, providing he can stop the king priest from calling down God's wrath. Soth returns to a familiar situation. Soth's depression lifts as he is about to embark on the quest to stop the king priest. He even takes 3 of his most loyal knights with him to Istar, but they encounter something strange along the way. Remember the band of silver nasty elves who Isolde was with? Well, they make another appearance, strangely. But what is more curious is what they tell Soth. So the elf maidens reveal to Soth that Isolde doesn't love him and has been having countless affairs. Death blow, however, is when they allege that his beloved son Peredur isn't his. Now, I don't know their motivation for telling Soth this. Perhaps it was jealousy, or maybe it was something else. Maybe there are other forces at play here, and they were sent by the king priest to distract Soth from his mission. Nevertheless, upon hearing these revelations, Soth loses himself in a deep rage and kills all of the elves. Incensed, he abandons his quest to stop the cataclysm and rides back to Zagyg Keep to confront Isolde. As Soth arrives home, Isolde greets him with their son. He shouts and screams at her, accusing her of infidelity. Isolde protests her innocence. During this explosive argument, the cataclysm strikes Kryn, sending shockwaves throughout the land. And it's these shockwaves that bring down a chandelier on Isolde and their son. With her dying breath, she hands Soth Peredur, but because he is convinced the baby isn't his son, he leaves him to die with his mother. Seeing Soth abandon them both, Isolde musters enough energy to curse him, declaring that he will live one life for every life lost due to the cataclysm. As the flames from the broken chandelier spread throughout the house, Soth, realising what he has done, lets the fire destroy him. But the gods want him to suffer. They honour Isolde's curse, and Soth awakes neither alive nor dead. He is now a Death Knight, or Knight of the Black Rose. Soth is changed. After the cataclysm and death of his once beloved Isolde and son, Soth spends hundreds of years roaming around his castle ruins. As the gods were especially cruel, they not only resurrected his charred remains, but also the skeletal bodies of his most loyal followers, including Caradoc, who was, if you remember, tasked with dispatching Soth's first wife and son. Moreover, the meddlesome elf maidens who spread the vicious lies about Isolde were also not spared peace and death, and now exist as banshees who torment Soth with songs of his vile deeds. Soth, who was once a proud and victorious knight, is now the evil he swore to kill. So I will end my story arc here. Of course there is more to Soth's lore, but I was more interested in his origins and how a knight as virtuous as him could fall from grace in such a catastrophic way. But were there always cracks and flaws in his character from the start that determined how he would evolve as a person? Even if there was no cataclysm, was he always corruptible? If we think back to Soth's childhood, his half-siblings were murdered by Caradoc on behalf of Soth's father to prevent them from having a claim to the Soth estate. These early experiences no doubt influenced Soth and his ruthlessness. Of course, he could have overcome what life threw his way, but he did not, and he showed his wives and children the same level of cruelty as his father did with his. And this is what we have to think about as GMs when writing compelling characters within our campaigns. How deep do those flaws go, and what key experiences shape the characters we write? If you've enjoyed this story arc, I have several more, which cover Tasha, Fraz Urb'luu, Vecna, and Strahd. Don't forget to subscribe to see the first of my videos. Anyway, that's all for today, folks, and I'll see you in the next one.